Okay, let's unpack this. Graphic design. Now, before you mentally check out, thinking this is just for, actual design professionals, let me tell you, it's absolutely not. This deep dive is really for anyone who sends an email, reads a brochure, or even just glances at a business card. By the end of this conversation, I think we're going to change how you perceive the entire visual world around you.
Exactly. Today, we're diving deep into some really fascinating material, key excerpts from a visual dictionary of graphic design and also the non-designer's design book. Our mission, really, is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed, and maybe more importantly, spark those aha
Moments, I like that.
Yeah. Think of it like a story from one of our sources where the authors suddenly start seeing Joshua trees everywhere after learning about them. Once you gain that conscious awareness of something, you just start noticing it in places you never did before. And that's exactly what this deep dive should do for your understanding of design.
Right. And what we're focusing on today are the four core principles that, well, they truly underpin almost all effective graphic design. Understanding these isn't just about making things look pretty, it's the absolute key to making any visual communication you create, or even just encounter, far more impactful. Easier to understand. We call them PR: proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast.
Okay, let's jump right into proximity. This is essentially the art of intelligent grouping.
Cool.
The fundamental idea is pretty simple. Elements that are intellectually connected should also be visually connected,
Yeah,
grouped together.
makes sense.
And conversely, unrelated items, they need to be clearly separated. The way you vary spacing, even subtly, instantly communicates relationships between things on the page. Our sources give a great example with a concert ad. When the spacing between different concert listings is varied,
You immediately know which one is different.
exactly, you instantly grasp which concert is separate or somehow distinct from the others, just by that visual grouping.
That makes perfect sense. I can already think of so many times I've seen text that just sort of blends together because everything's squished.
Precisely. Or consider the cowboy mini poster redesign example. By simply moving headlines closer to their related paragraphs, the organization just snaps into place.
Yeah.
That awkward, trapped white space vanishes, and the whole piece suddenly feels less cluttered.
Ah, trapped white space. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And think about something as common as a resume. If your job titles have the same spacing above and below them as the body text, well, they just blend right in. It makes it incredibly difficult to scan quickly. Your eye doesn't know where to start, or where one section ends and another begins.
Wow, okay, that's incredibly practical. So if proximity groups things, how does alignment then bring a sense of order to those groups? What's that invisible line doing?
That's a great way to put it. Alignment truly is like an invisible line connecting separate elements on a page.
Yeah.
This invisible thread creates unity and organization, and that results in a much cleaner, sharper, more professional image.
Yeah.
Our sources highlight a problematic business card example that uses 3 different alignments: flush left, flush right, and centered. It's just a visual mess, almost chaotic, really.
Yeah, I can picture that.
But when you apply a single, strong, deliberate alignment, say, everything flush left or everything flush right, the card instantly looks professional and unified.
I see that everywhere now. Like if you align everything to one strong edge, it just feels so much more intentional, more solid.
Exactly. The same principle applies to stationery design. Instead of that dull centered layout we've all seen a million times, imagine stationery with a huge company name aligned strongly to the right, running down the side. Or all contact info aligned flush left to the bottom. It's a deliberate choice that brings strength and coherence.
Right.
And yes, a resume with 2 different alignments, say centered headings and flush left text, it just makes it less effective, harder to process quickly. Even a seemingly messy phone book ad can be vastly improved by simply aligning text and photos or illustrations to a strong edge or a baseline. It just pulls everything together visually.
So it's about creating order out of potential chaos.
Okay, so from pulling things together with alignment, we move to repetition. This sounds like it's about weaving cohesion into your design. But what's the difference between repetition and just, well, being consistent? Is there one?
Oh, absolutely. That's a crucial distinction. Repetition goes beyond just being naturally consistent. It's a conscious, intentional effort to unify all parts of a design. It's about creating visual echoes, sort of. These echoes powerfully control the reader's eye and make everything feel like it belongs together, like it's part of a single piece.
Visual echoes. I like that.
Let's revisit that business card redesign example.
Okay.
When a strong, bold typeface is repeated for key information, like the name and the company, Your eye doesn't just wander off the card when you're done reading. Instead, it kind of bounces back and forth between those bold elements. And that ties the entire piece together visually.
So it's almost like leaving a visual breadcrumb trail for the eye. Precisely. And you can strengthen existing repetitions, too. Say you have a subtle one-point rule, a thin line under headings. Try making it a stronger four-point rule to really emphasize that repetition throughout the document.
Okay, make it more obvious.
Exactly. Or if you have numbered lists, use a distinctive font or style just for those numbers throughout the entire publication. One of the sources uses an analogy. It's like accenting your clothes.
Oh, okay.
A black dress with red heels, red lipstick, and maybe a tiny red corsage. That works. It's coordinated. But if you add a red hat, red earrings, a red handbag, red shoes, and a red coat, well, that's just overdoing it.
Right, it becomes too much, distracting.
Exactly. So while repetition is powerful, you definitely want to caution against annoying or overwhelming repetition. Use it purposefully.
So a little goes a long way, but it has to be intentional.
Got it. And finally, the principle that really makes things pop. Contrast. You mentioned this is crucial for attracting the eye and organizing information, allowing a reader to instantly understand what's going on at a glance. What's the core rule here? The rule is simple, and I love this. Don't be a wimp.
Huh, okay. Be bold.
Yes. If your resume is just a gray page with very little contrast, it's visually boring. It discourages reading. But use strong, bold heads and job titles, and you instantly convey hierarchy. You make it easy to scan and find information.
Right. The important stuff jumps out.
Or think about that messy phone book ad we mentioned. When everything is roughly the same size, the same weight, the same importance, it's just ineffective. Nothing stands out. You need to decide on a focal point and make it, well, big and bold. Create that visual hierarchy.
So contrast is about making choices that are obvious and create a focal point, guiding the reader. What are the most powerful tools in a designer's arsenal to achieve that instant understanding? Where do we start?
Absolutely. The most effective place to start often is with typeface. Fonts. Think of fonts in maybe two main categories that are excellent for creating contrast. Serif and sans serif. Serifs are those little feet at the end of letter strokes, like what you see in classic books, Times New Roman, for example. They're generally considered great for long blocks of text because those serifs can help guide the eye along the line. Sans serifs, which literally means without serifs, are cleaner, often seen as more modern. Think Arial or Helvetica. They're often used for headlines, captions, or text on digital screens.
Okay.
Beyond that, you have script fonts, which look like handwriting for a personal touch, and decorative fonts for special impact, maybe a logo or a poster title. The key insight here isn't just knowing the categories, but knowing how to combine them for maximum impact without it looking messy or chaotic.
How so?
Well, for example, pairing a classic serif font for your body text with a bold, clean sans serif for your headlines creates wonderful, clear contrast. It helps distinguish the different roles of the text immediately.
Ah, okay, that immediately clarifies things. I used to just pick whatever font looked nice without much thought to pairing. So beyond the type itself, what else can create strong contrast? You mentioned size and weight.
Yes, size is a big one. And again, don't be a wimp. Make your size contrasts obvious. Think a headline at 36 point next to body text at 12 point. That's a clear difference. Don't go for subtle differences like, say, 65 point next to 72 point. It just looks like a mistake, not an intentional choice.
Or it'd be deliberate.
Then there's weight. Using bold or light versions of a typeface for emphasis, like putting a key phrase in a bold sans serif within a paragraph of regular serif body copy. It pops right out.
Okay.
And finally, you can use other elements, like lines, or rules as they're called in design. Use a strong 2 or 4 point rule instead of a thin, weak hairline. Colors should truly contrast. Think a light color on a dark background, or warm versus cool colors, not just slightly different shades of dark blue, for instance.
That wouldn't stand out much.
Exactly. Spacing between elements can create contrast, too, grouping some things tightly and leaving generous space around others. Even textures can add contrast. And you can also use direction, cropping photographs or clip art into unexpected tall, narrow shapes, maybe, or setting text in narrow vertical columns, like in that Mac user group postcard example from the source. It creates a different visual flow.
It's really incredible how many intentional choices go into what often seems like an effortless design.
It really is. And what's fascinating here is how these principles, especially contrast, aren't new ideas. They've evolved. Jan Schickhold, a German typographer, was a leading advocate for modernist design back in the 1920s. You might have heard of him.
The name sounds familiar.
His manifesto promoted using sans serif fonts and what he called non-centered design. He really emphasized contrast and the deliberate active use of white space. He was truly a visionary in shaping modern typography and design as we know it. And it reminds us that effective layouts rarely rely on just one principle of contrast. They often combine multiple principles, size, weight, color, direction, to make the design dynamic and engaging. It actively pulls the reader's eye around the page, guiding their experience.
So we've covered the foundational PRSA principles: proximity, alignment, repetition, contrast, which are all about guiding the eye, creating clarity, making things make sense visually. But graphic design clearly goes so much deeper than just those visible arrangement elements. Let's transition maybe to some other crucial elements that contribute, showing the incredible breadth of this field.
Absolutely. When we start talking about color and imagery, it's crucial to understand the technical systems at play, especially the difference between screen and print. You've probably heard of CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. The K stands for key, which is usually black. These are the subtractive primaries used for printing, ink on paper.
Right, like in my desktop printer cartridges.
Exactly. Then you have RGB red, green, and blue. These are additive primaries used for screens, monitors, phones, TVs, light mixing together.
Okay, so what's the key takeaway here for us, the non-designers? Why do we need to know the difference between CMYK and RGB?
Well, the key insight isn't just knowing the letters, but understanding why your vibrant on-screen design might look disappointingly dull once it's printed. It's because the RGB color space, the range of colors screens can show, is generally much wider than the CMYK gamut used in printing.
Ah, so screens can show brighter, more intense colors.
Precisely. So when you convert an RGB image for CMYK printing, you're essentially losing some of those brilliant hues. They get compressed into the smaller CMYK range. The takeaway: always consider your final medium right from the start. If it's going to be printed, design or adjust with CMYK limitations in mind to manage your color expectations. Don't expect that electric blue on screen to look the same on paper.
That's really useful advice.
And related to color, we also talk about hue, which is basically the pure color itself, the wavelength, like red, green, blue, and saturation, which is its purity or intensity, how much gray it contains. Manipulating these, desaturating an image, shifting its hue, can drastically change the mood and impact.
Okay. And what about the images themselves? You mentioned pixels.
Right. Then there are bitmaps. These are images constructed of a fixed grid of tiny squares, or pixels, like a mosaic. More pixels mean higher resolution, which gives you more detail. We measure this in dots per inch, DPI for print, or pixels per inch, PPI, for screens. This very concept of the pixel, the basic block of digital images, even inspired font designers back in the day. Zuzana Liko's Citizen font from 1986, for example, is directly inspired by how early Macintosh screens smoothed out those blocky stair-step pixels into diagonals.
Fascinating how technology influences aesthetics. Okay, so we've talked about the building blocks of images and color on screen and print. But how do all these digital elements come together to create something tangible, like a book or a magazine? Let's maybe explore the physical world of publishing, some key terms related to how these creations are actually put together.
Yeah, the physical object matters too. When it comes to binding, the way pages are held together is actually a deliberate design choice, affecting how a publication feels and functions. You have perfect binding, which uses glue to hold pages to a flat spine, very common in paperback novels and magazines. Gives you that clean edge.
Okay.
Then there's things like spiral binding, often seen in notebooks or reports, which uses a wire or plastic coil. The big advantage there is that the book can lie completely flat when open. A practical design decision.
Right, easier to write in.
Exactly. And some methods are quite clever. One source mentions the Z-bind, which uses this ingenious Z-shaped cover to bind two separate documents together into one package. Imagine using that for, say, a presentation where you have technical specs on one side and beautiful glossy imagery on the other. It lets your audience explore them independently, but keeps them connected.
Oh, that's clever. I've never heard of that.
Two other vital terms, especially for professional printing, are bleed and creep. Bleed is when you extend images or colors about 3 millimeters past the final trim marks on a page.
Why do you do that?
It's essential insurance. When the pages are stacked and cut to their final size, there's always a tiny bit of variation. The bleed ensures that even if the cut is slightly off, you won't get any unwanted white edges showing at the trim line. The color bleeds off the edge.
Ah, okay, so you don't get that little white sliver.
Precisely. However, you usually don't need this extra bleed allowance on the side where the pages are bound because of something called creep. Creep, or shingling, happens in saddle-stitched or folded publications. The inner pages of a folded section physically stick out further than the outer ones, especially with thicker paper.
Right, because they have a tighter fold radius?
Exactly. This means design elements placed too close to the foredge, that's the outer edge of the book, opposite the spine on those inner pages might get trimmed off accidentally. So designers need to account for creep and keep important stuff away from that outer edge on inner signatures.
Wow, so much mechanical stuff to consider too.
And we can't talk about layout without revisiting white space. That term we mentioned earlier. Jan Tyscholdt famously called it the lungs of good design. It's not just empty area, it's an active element.
The breathing room.
Yes. It's the unprinted space that surrounds graphic and text elements, providing that breathing room and helping to organize the content. Especially in busy layouts like newspaper ads, generous white space can actually make an ad stand out more effectively. It draws the reader's eye into this space, making it feel less chaotic and more focused.
So white space isn't wasted space.
Not at all. It's a powerful tool. And related to composition, there's the rule of thirds. This is primarily a guideline for photography, but is very applicable to layout design too. You imagine overlaying a simple 3x3 grid on your page or image. This grid creates 4 intersection points, or hotspots. Placing key visual elements like a focal point image or an important headline at or near these hotspots often creates more dynamic, visually interesting, and engaging results. It helps avoid a static, centered composition.
It's incredible how many intentional choices, both visible and almost invisible like creep, go into what seems like an effortless final design. But design isn't just about what's visible or how it's physically made. It taps into deeper psychological and cultural currents, doesn't it? Let's maybe delve into some truly fascinating concepts that reveal how we interpret and interact with design on a more profound level.
Indeed. This is where it gets really interesting. First, there's semiotics, which is basically the study of signs and symbols. This field explores how people extract meaning from, well, everything. Words, sounds, pictures through signs, the systems they operate within, like language or visual conventions, and crucially, their cultural context.
Meaning isn't inherent, it's learned.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
For instance, the interpretation of a simple visual sign like a cross can vary wildly depending on the cultural background of the viewer. It might mean religion, or first aid, or simply marking a spot. The insight here for anyone communicating visually is that design isn't universal. Its meaning is deeply tied to how a specific culture interprets its symbols and visual language.
That's a really powerful point. So what else is influencing our visual perception, sometimes without us even realizing it?
Well, related to that is the concept of hyperreality. This describes an artistic style, or maybe a condition of postmodern culture, that blends reality and representation to such an extent that it creates improved versions of reality.
Improved versions, like what?
This is where fantasy and reality kind of collide, making it difficult to distinguish between the simulation and the real thing. Think of heavily photoshopped images that look better than any real person could. Or theme park environments like Disneyland that create a version of Main Street USA that feels perhaps more real, more perfect than any actual historical Main Street ever was.
Right. The simulation becomes more attractive than the original.
Exactly. The implication for design is profound. We can create experiences and images that feel more compelling, more engaging, or maybe even more true than reality itself.
That's slightly unnerving, but fascinating.
And then there's kitsch. This is a term often used somewhat pejoratively to refer to a style considered overly sentimental, maybe pretentious, or just in bad taste. It frequently draws on mass culture artifacts for its inspiration. Think garden gnomes or velvet paintings.
Stuff generally considered tacky.
Often, yes. But what's truly interesting about kitsch, from a design perspective, is how it demonstrates that good design isn't a fixed objective standard. It's constantly being reevaluated by culture and fashion. What's rejected as bad taste or kitschy today might be ironically embraced or even become genuinely cool or high fashion as tastes change tomorrow. Think of the resurgence of 80s aesthetics, for example. It really pushes us, as viewers and creators, to question our own biases about what's visually appealing and why.
Okay, so we've gone from basic principles like putting things close together all the way to cultural interpretations and the nature of reality and design. So what does all this mean for you, our listener, wrapping this all up?
Well, I think it means that even without formal design training, just by consciously understanding and maybe starting to apply these principles, PRs, color, layout, you're not just making things pretty, you're actively guiding the viewer's cognition and perception. You're making communication clearer, more effective.
That's the real power, isn't it? Armed with an understanding of proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast, and these deeper insights into color, layout, and even the psychology of design, You now possess the tools to not only appreciate well-designed pieces you see every day, but also to potentially create them yourself, or at least improve them. You can now look at everything from a business card to a website with more of a designer's eye, and maybe instantly see ways to improve your own projects, your own emails, your own presentations. You're not just looking anymore, hopefully. You're seeing the choices behind the visuals.
Indeed. And maybe a final thought to leave you with, considering how even something seemingly empty, like white space, can powerfully draw your eye to an ad on a busy newspaper page, or how a specific font choice might subtly influence your trust in a brand's message. It really raises an important question. What other invisible design choices might be subtly influencing your decisions, your feelings, and your interpretations every single day, without you even realizing it?